Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com. Well, today we have some huge news, and of course, that comes after yesterday. I was talking about E&Y breaking up. Um, so in the middle of the day yesterday, news came out that E&Y's breakup plans are being halted. Now, if you only read the headlines or something like that, then you're going to think that E&Y is not going to break up. And I think a lot of people are going to lean that way. But based on what I've been reading, they still are going to break up. Now, what has changed was that the Project Everest is coming to an end. And Project Everest was this specific plan the ENY had to split up, which, if you might remember, that specific plan ends with an IPO of the consulting arm, and the audit branch of the firm would be its own firm. It's kind of funny because yesterday I was talking about KPMG being sued and how, why splitting up would make things better. And that's why I think that EY is still going to break up, especially based on what I've been reading. I think they're still pursuing this, and it seems like that's the reason they're really doing this, and that they plan on pursuing that. Now, if that's the case, then why the heck did they scrap this now? Well, I think there's a lot of reasons, and I think the biggest reason is the one that I've been talking about the whole time. They would limit this. The way they were doing this version was IPOing into a soft market, and the more they wait, as long as the timeline's the next year or 2 years, they were probably going to be IPOing into a terrible market. But not only that, you have to remember that if the market is soft, if the economy is soft, which I think E&Y and the Big Four are already seeing, then their consulting revenues are going to be going down. And you have to remember consultants have already been let go at KPMG. So we know consulting is not doing that well. And so if you're trying to IPO and you're trying to forecast revenue and you're trying to say, hey, we're an amazing firm, we're doing amazing, and these are the revenues that we expect, and then you show your year-to-date performance and it's terrible, and people are going to be like, well, why? How do I know your valuations are right if your revenue for consulting is going down and the economy is only getting worse? And so I think people were worried about IPOing. I think the partners were worried about their payoffs. And if they did keep some equity, that equity would just go down, which has happened to a lot of IPOs recently. So I think that part of it is why it's getting scrapped, is because of IPOing into a bad economy, and the consulting revenues are most likely going down, and that's the business that you're trying to sell to the market. So I just thought that wasn't feasible. They timed this thing wrong if that's what their ultimate goal was. Now, let's say they push this even further. They push it like 5 years down the road. Well, then I think they might come back to this. I think that's what might happen. And in one of the things that they distributed, they buried it in there because they put a whole bunch of PR stuff around it, but they mentioned the bad economy and the financial markets and credit markets. I think that's the other thing too, is they were trying to take out loans and things like that. And so you're trying to IPO into a market, you're trying to take out credit at higher interest rates, or maybe they couldn't obtain some credit that they needed. So that's another thing that people aren't even thinking about. So I think what happens next is E&Y, they have to go back to the drawing table. They have to figure out whether Carmine DeCibio is going to be the CEO, because a lot of people said if this thing didn't go through, that he's going to lose his job. I don't know whether that'll happen or not, because what would be the point of that? But we'll see, because I think he might have ruffled some feathers for pushing it this hard. But we'll see what happens. And then I think what could happen, you don't have to IPO the consulting branch. It could be owned by the partners. It can be owned by private equity partially. So I think what might happen is split it up and keep it as partnerships the way it already is. just split it up into a consulting firm and then an audit firm. And then you still have the big four audit firms, but just EY audit is a lot smaller. So I think the split up is still going to go through based on what I've been reading, but also just based on the regulation that EY is facing in Europe. In Germany, we just learned that through about Wirecard, but also KPMG facing the lawsuits that they're going to face regarding these bank failures. I think the desire is still there. They referenced all this regulation in their PR around this. So I think the reasoning and the desire to split up is still there, or they're just going to face scrutiny on the audits everywhere, like they already are, like the other big four accounting firms are. But this is huge news. It changes a lot of things at E&Y for people that work there. It changes a lot of things for this executive team at E&Y, because it's pretty embarrassing to be so gung-ho, to tell people to drink the Kool-Aid, it tastes so good, and then you're like, actually, a couple months later, where Carmine DeCibio was sending out information reaffirming this plan to split up, and he just scraps it. So I think it's pretty embarrassing for the executive team. There's a lot of implications from this, because people were working towards this. So to think that this is not going to happen now, or it's delayed, and they have to start strategizing on a new plan to split up, and that'll take time as well. And they'll throw people's lives in the blender, and people that who knows what this will have implications this will have on morale and retention, because things were kind of wishy-washy before as far as what's going to happen after the split, but at least people had that in the mind that it was going to happen. And now it's not going to happen. Things are definitely wishy-washy. So I think you're going to have a retention problem. But that could also be good for the employees too, because why might try to throw some extra money around to retain people through this. I'm sure they raised some money to do this split, and maybe they could use that to pay their employees. But then again, that's who knows if that'll happen. If that happens, it most likely go to the executives. But we'll see. I think they might have a retention problem because if you go down one route of split up and you're like, no, that was actually bad, but like, let's pursue another one, and then you don't do that, like what happens from there? Or if you scrap this plan, you say we're going to do something else, but then you fire your executive team, or they resign or transition, whatever you want to call it. But the politically correct way of transitioning somebody out versus firing them, if they do that, that'll raise a lot of questions. You might have partners actually leave because they don't know what's going on. You might have partners leave because they were involved in this and they got in fights with people. There's a lot of interesting implications from here. But now that EY is delayed it, maybe another big four will also try this, but move faster, come up with a better plan. But we'll see what happens. This really is an interesting time at the big four. And we'll have to keep you updated. And we'll have a link in the show notes we've been tracking this breakup plan for EY. So we'll put that link in the show notes. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and make sure to check out the show notes for just other useful links too. Thanks for listening.